Okay, you ready to get started?
Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Hello and welcome back.
All right.
Probably some outtakes.
No.
Hello and welcome back to the Goodness Margin, the place where we find margin for the good things in life. As you can see, today I have a really special guest. This is my husband, Lane Kuhn. Today we're going to talk all about our annual planning session or whatever you want to call it. So fast forward to, or not fast forward. Let me start over.
Rewind.
Rewind to 20 years ago, at least 20 years ago, a long time ago. When we were dating, I remember sitting across from my then boyfriend at McDonald's. It was very romantic. And he asked me, he said,
go big or go home.
Right. We were very, very poor college students. He said, where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years? And I wanted to have a really great answer, but I had no answer. And I realized it wasn't something that just I thought about very often. And so about 10 years into our marriage, we started making this an annual tradition where every fall we sit down and we talk about our goals for the next year. That was really something that you implemented because we work together well as far as Lane is the big picture guy. Like he sees the big vision and sometimes it's scary to me. And then I want to break it down into manageable pieces, but that works well for us.
Yeah. Well, I think about goals as being kind of the target you're aiming for. You have a direction, something to head toward. And without a goal, how do you know if you're making any progress? So.
Right. And everyone that's watched any of my videos has heard it said multiple times because there's so many productivity and all these gurus that talk about that if you don't have a goal, if you don't set a goal and create a plan, it is not going to happen. And so that's what this meeting is about. So the reason we're doing this video is because there have been multiple times we've been talking with friends and it comes up that we have this meeting and people are like, hold on. Tell me about this. I was just talking to a friend of mine and she said, I want you to write down exactly what you guys do. And so linked in the blog post below is an outline of sort of how we do this meeting. We're going to talk about 4 things: where we were at last year, where we are currently, where we want to be, and then how are we going to get there? And those are the 4 things we're going to talk about through each category.
Now, the purpose for having this meeting is not just to establish goals, but so that our goals align. Mm-hmm. Because if you set goals, in marriage, alignment is very important. You don't want to be pulling in opposite directions of one another. And so sitting down together and saying, I have this goal for my life, and then your spouse has a different goal. You can take those goals and bring them together and help one another, first off. But the other thing is that you build unity in your family. Mm-hmm. So you're not pulling against one another and you get so far down the road that you find out your life is not in alignment with each other. And then you start having marital issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really important to sit down together, not just to each individually do it and then send each other an email about it, to do it together, because then you learn what the other person's priorities are. And as we'll talk about through some of those categories, it's really important for you to work together on these goals. So the first thing we talk about are finances. That is actually the number one thing that couples,
make it rain.
Right.
Just kidding.
That's the number one thing that couples argue about. It's said it's one of the number one reasons for divorce. And so talk about finances. It's not always fun to talk about, but it's always necessary to talk about.
We all like to spend our money in different ways.
Right. Everyone has different priorities. And Dave Ramsey says that one of you is the saver and one of you is the spender. And what we found...
Or you're both the spender.
Yeah.
Or you're both the saver.
We both enjoy saving money, but we both also have areas that we want to spend money on. And that's really the way it is. So the first thing we're going to look at is what were our financial goals last year? And we save this outline and the notes that we take in an Evernote document. And so that way it's really easy for us both to have access to it. And then we can easily look back at what we talked about last year and, keep that in front of us throughout the year. So what were our goals last year? We're going to look at those. And then we're going to look at where are we at currently.
You have to look back so that you can look forward, like a rear view mirror in life. To know you're going the right direction, you have to look behind you sometimes.
Right. So
Philosophy by Lane.
So we're going to see where we were last year or where we wanted to be. And then did we get there? If we did, great. If we didn't, why not? And so then we're going to set our goals for the next year. Where do we want to be? And this is also a time where we look at retirement, which that is his department is looking out at the future of that. And seeing, are we saving enough for retirement? How's it doing? All of those things that kind of sometimes can stress me out. You want to say anything there?
I don't know that I have anything to add.
Okay, we'll just move on. We're also going to look at our savings. What are we saving for? Where are we at with that? And then we're going to create a plan of how are we going to complete these goals. I mean, you could say, I would love to save $100,000 next year. Well, okay, divide that by 12. Is that something that you can do? So you have to look at, what do I want to do? And then how am I going to do it? What do we need to do?
You have to make smart goals, attainable goals.
Yeah.
They have to be something you're capable of doing. And if, it may be as simple as looking at your finances and saying, you know what, we're living a little outside of our means. Where can we cut the budget? Is it by eliminating some streaming service or some monthly music service or just something that will free up some margin for the goals you want to have financially?
We utilize Quicken for our personal finances, and that's where that I kind of keep up with what we're spending. And it really helps me to look at what I've spent on kids' clothing, what we spent on home decorations, those kinds of things, sort of break those things down. Because it's really easy to see like, okay, this is what our mortgage is. This is typically what our utilities are. But really, we can't cut back on those things. But where we can cut back are those extra expenditures. And so we take the time to look through that and see what we spent and usually where we need to cut back. That's typically what it ends up being.
Well, and and I think we'll talk about this later, but we'll do a monthly kind of checkup. And some of that is looking at a profit and loss statement. And if you don't know what a profit and loss statement is, it's just basically a statement that says, we made this amount of money and we spent this amount of money. And did we lose money or did we keep some of our money? Because it's important to try and keep some of that money. You're working hard for it.
Right. And so that's our financial snapshot. And sort of finances really runs into each part of what we're going to talk about throughout this meeting that we have together. The second part of what we talk about, the second category is family. One of the things we're going to talk about is vacations. Those are really important to us. And you've probably heard me talk about it where I talk about gifts. We love to, rather than spend a lot of money on things, we like to spend money on experiences. If you think about your most memorable experiences or times, your best memories with your family, it's not going to be a gift you received. It's going to be some time that you spent with your family. And so we have a 15-year-old. He's going to be out of the house really soon. It's important for us to prioritize that time as a family. And it costs money. So we have to say, okay, we can't do, this huge vacation every year. What are we going to do this year that's going to be a memorable experience? We discussed that. And
if you don't plan it ahead, you end up paying for it after you've already spent it. And that's way more expensive than if you make the plan ahead of time and use a little patience to pay for it.
Absolutely. And then we also talk about how we're going to travel individually. Both of us travel for different things. And so we talk about, okay, what are our limits? What are our boundaries with that? Because if you don't create a boundary, the next thing you know, you're going to be gone far more than you want to be. That happened to me in 2019. I was gone a lot. And then 2020, not nearly as much.
Single parenthood is not fun.
Oh, please. That's not what happened. If you don't set boundaries on how often you're going to travel individually, whether it's for work or whatever the reasons are, then if you don't set boundaries, what am I trying to say here?
It gets out of control.
The third thing we talk about in this category of families is our kids. Like, what are we teaching our kids? That's where we talk about our family devotions and different things that we want to do with our children, just being intentional about those things. And then the fourth thing that we talk about is recapping wins, because I don't know about you, but as a parent, I can definitely be really, really hard on myself and see all of the places that I need to do better, which is important to look at where I need to do better. But it's also important to look at our wins and to say, hey, you know, our kid did this. That's really, really good. Or this is something they're really interested in. Let's push them in this. And so that's just sort of encompasses what we talk about with family.
Well, it's also important to measure what your kids are involved in, because if you have them doing too much, then you just become their taxi. Should I say that a different way?
Yeah.
If you have your kids involved in too much stuff, it's important to look and say, what are we going to cut out? Because the lie that we perpetrate to our kids that you can have everything and do everything, I really feel like is a negative aspect of American culture, where we get to be adults and we realize, oh, I have to choose and make sacrifices in my life if I'm going to get the things I want. And anyway, that's a broader subject.
Yeah.
But
I mean, you really
you
can't
have to measure
it all.
You have to measure it and see what are we going to get rid of? You know, maybe this year it's cutting out one of the, 15 sports we get our kids in or something.
The third category that we talk about is home projects. Obviously, this is something that we talk about because we have a home. And all of these are categories.
It's tough to have projects if you don't have a home.
Right. And that is one positive of renting sometimes. I think, goodness, why did we want a yard? Maybe we should have.
When we say projects, we really mean repairs.
Basically. We plan for those things. And so that's one really important thing for us to talk about together of what are our priorities, because I may be thinking I would really love to do our bathroom, or he's thinking something totally different. And
backyard barbecue.
That is not on the list for next year, unfortunately, for Elaine. But so we sit down and we talk about, okay, what are the important things for us to do in our house? What do we need to do? Because unfortunately, like he said, I mean, a couple of years ago, we had to replace our roof. That was not a fun, oh, look how beautiful this is. You post these pictures online of how beautiful your roof is. No one notices or cares, but we have to do those things.
I noticed my bank account.
That's where another part of finances goes into really each category that we talk about, because we may want to do all of these things, but we have to be realistic of what can we do and how much is it going to cost, and then the time frame for it. Because a lot of these projects, like a couple of years ago, we redid our kitchen and it like upset our entire household for like a week and a half. Like we didn't have a sink. I mean, it's a big deal when you cannot use your kitchen, like a really big deal. And so you have to think, when are we going to do this? How much is it going to cost? All of those things.
Should have had that backyard barbecue kitchen built first.
That probably would have been a good idea. The fourth category is our personal goals. And so while we have talked about family and the things we're going to do together, there are things that you're going to do individually. And it's important to share those goals with each other. It's important to talk about them because you can kind of iron sharpens iron and talk about, okay, is this a good time to do this? There was the year that I was expecting Elsie and we had just started homeschooling Wyatt. And then I said I wanted to go back to school. And he really challenged me on that of maybe that's a little bit too much for you to take off. Oh, and it was the first year we were planning a church too.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you have to cover one another in a sense. I mean, if you're in this together. So if I'm going to advance my career with some certification or, degree or anything, she has to take up the slack of my absence and vice versa. So it's best to plan those things together. And
actually this YouTube channel and the Goodness Margin blog is all from one of these meetings in 2019. We sat down and I said, okay, I've been talking about this for a while, but I feel like it's time for my little closed Facebook group to become a blog that I want to do. And so he really pushed me forward with that. And that's another important thing about sharing those goals with each other is not just to kind of check each other and say, is this the best time, but also to be accountable to each other and to also, what can I do to help? Because he was a huge part of, he built the website. He is going to edit this video. I do none of that at all. And so how can you help each other in those goals? That's a really important thing to talk about. We look at our goals that we had for the previous year. And did we accomplish those this year? If we did, great. Let's celebrate that. If we didn't, why not? And are they still relevant? Is this something that I still need to do that we still want to do? So that could be the first thing that you talk about. Finally, let's talk about, when are you going to do this? We have done it before where that the kids were at the grandparents and we had a date night and it was so nice. We had a nice dinner. This year, we just absolutely did not have the time to do that. And so we planned to do it one day when our teenager was actually with my mom and Elsie was going to be in school. Unfortunately, she woke up with a fever and was home that day. So she watched a movie while we sat at this kitchen table and we did it. And so you just have to make the time for it. It may not be ideal, but it is really important that you try to limit your distractions. Maybe do it after the kids are asleep. For us, we're both morning. We're our best selves in the morning. And so talking about it at night would not be ideal for us, like really late after the kids go to bed, because we're going to be tired. But we woke up that morning, realized she wasn't going to school. And so we sort of repositioned things but we had set aside time that day, made a decision of this is the time that we're going to do this. You have to prioritize this and put it on the calendar.
And when you do this, especially if it's your first time doing it, allow a little more time. Mm-hmm. And what we found is over the years, you kind of get in this process of it's refined and it gets faster for you. And you kind of already know where you're going. And mm-hmm. we talked about, we start out big long-term goals, 10 years. Where are we going to be in 10 years, then 5 years? They don't have to be detailed and defined. Just, you know what, in 10 years, we would like to have some other investments. We'd like to have, own a rental home or some rental homes or whatever. And then 5 years and then 1 year. But the real rubber meets the road on the 1 year goals.
Yeah. And it's really important to talk about those 5 and 10-year goals. While that is not something that I'm always the best at looking at, it's important now to talk about. One day, I think it would be really cool to own a loft in the city and to do like an Airbnb situation. Well, if I never voice that, then he never hears me say that. And it's not something that we communicate to each other. So how is he going to know that that's something I've actually thought about? So go ahead and just dream, talk about the future, because 10 years will be here before you know it. And if we don't talk about it, and if we don't plan for it, those things are not going to happen.
As I mentioned earlier, one of the things we do is monthly, we come back. And for us, it's the first Monday of the month. Mm-hmm. We sit down and talk about where our finances are at, how we're doing on our goals for that year. The mistake people make is looking at the year like they have a lot of time. Mm-hmm. And then you get to the last quarter and you're like, well, I got to hurry and get all these goals done. If you can fit those things in throughout the year and measure your progress, then it helps you to get to the end of the year and have more things done than not done. And you're not always going to hit every one of your goals. It's just not going to happen. Some years you might crush it.
And that's why we break our goals down into quarterly goals. Actually, we look at what we want to do over the year. But I mean, that's the reason that New Year's resolutions don't work, because everyone says, I'm going to lose 25 pounds. I'm going to read a book a week and I'm going to do this and this and this. And then somehow they don't get it all done in January. And so they give up. So we do break our goals down into quarterly goals, which I have another video about quarterly goals. But we do sit down each month and talk about those things. And we're actually going to do a follow-up video. So be on the lookout for that. And Lane has agreed to be on that with me as well. And we will discuss exactly how we do our monthly meetings.
If you have not, you really should subscribe.
It would be great if you would subscribe to my channel, hit the bell so you'll be notified when the next video goes live. If you haven't done this already, I really encourage you just to sit down with your spouse and have these meetings. I think you will see it will make a big impact in your life and in your marriage. And obviously, if you have a great marriage, that is definitely going to add margin in your life for the good things.
More margin. What does margin look like for you?
Okay.
You don't want me to keep going?
I think we're all done.
I might not be done. I might have things to share.
Share away. Take your 10 minutes of fame.
That's it. I only get 10 minutes. I don't even get 15 minutes. I just get 10 minutes. Thank you.